I know this sounds like a riveting idea for a video, but many kids doing the HSC right now, and I want to point out how easy it is to do the visual art subject, and I would like to say studies of religion for the HSC. So, here's a misconception. You don't have to be good at art to do visual art, because, right, your major work weighs like, what, half? And then your exam work's like half, and then like you take little chunks out of that half, and that's your usual class performance and whatever. So you don't have to be good at art, you just need to know what you're talking about. You need to know how to talk about the stuff that you made. Here's some pictures of the stuff that I made for the HSC. Do they look great? But did I have a concept? I did have a concept. My concept was I can paint people. There you go, ta-da. But some people who can't do art, they just make something and then they say, this is my concept. My concept is about, I don't know, fucking peace, belonging, family, whatever, mental health. And there you go, you can talk about it. You can talk about it well. You get marks for it. So, the other aspect is the essays. Oh, and I love the essays. The essays are great because you don't need a good structure, right? Compared to advanced English, it doesn't need to be a good English essay. You just need to have shit on page. You just vomit out the shit onto the page, and there you go. That's a good essay because you talked about shit. It's not that hard to remember. So if you're into art history and you're intimidated by all the HSC kids right now complaining about how hard the HSC is, and you're intimidated and you don't want to do visual art because you like art but you can't do art, do it. Chances are if you like art, you'll remember a lot of random shit that's happened in art history. Here's one. Constantine, whatever his last name, he made bird sculptures. Here's some pictures of bird sculptures. I went to the Canberra National Art Museum. There's some bird sculptures there on the same floor as Jackson Pollock, and quite frankly, Jackson Pollock is overrated. That's just my opinion. But I like the bird sculptures. They were like big pole and then like a... Right, it's not a sculpture of a bird, it's just like the motion of a bird. Here's a fun history fact, right? And this is how easy it is to remember random whack shit that's happening in art history. Because it's interesting, right? Artists are whack people, they've done whack shit. And if you talk about enough whack shit, you get marks in your essays. Constantine and his friends, right, they were going to America for an art show. He's got like a concrete or like a metal big bird sculpture, right? Doesn't look like a bird, but it's meant to be a bird. It's the motion of a bird. So they're trying to put this on the ship, and the shipping people were like, nah, that's not a bird. So that's gonna be called raw material. That's metal or concrete or whatever it was, and it's gonna cost thousands of dollars for them to put that on the ship. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna sell this, right? This isn't whatever. This is just bird. This is art. And they were like, no, it's not. So he went to court for it, and let me just exactly quote what happened in court. Constantine Brancusi court case 1876 to 1957. In 1926, his argument in court was, it has the suggestion of flight. It suggests grace, aspiration, vigor, coupled with speed, in the spirit of strength, potency, beauty, just as a bird does. But just the name, the title of this work, it does not mean much. Here's the quote, and this is what the judge said. In the meanwhile, there's been developing a so-called new school of art, whose exponents attempt to portray abstract ideas rather than imitate natural objects. Whether or not we are in sympathy with these new ideas and the schools which represent them, we think the facts of their existence and their influence upon the art world, as recognized by the courts, must be considered. The court was like, fine, it is art, it's not metal. One of his art arguments was that, sure, somebody made this, right? He made a worker to make the rough structure of it, but he said, I sat down for hours, I chiseled it, I spent time on it, and it's art. It's not meant to be used as metal or whatever. So there's an interesting thing for you. That's why I think that you don't need really to pay a lot of attention to what you remember, because as long as you can relate, say, this experience to whatever that's in the test, then you're going to do well. What you need to remember is time and date, when someone was born, how to spell someone's name. You don't mess up Monet and Manet. Name drop people. The only reason I remember Modigliani's name is that I googled the same era as, I don't know who I was talking about, not Picasso because I don't like him, but somebody, and you know, it all came up, Huso, they were all in the same era. And so I was like, fine, Modigliani, that's a cool name, those are cool art, I'm gonna pick him. And so you remember random extra shit. And if you want to remember the name Modigliani, you look up fun shit that he's done, right? You look at Modigliani's artwork and then you're like, funky lines, there you go, that's the dude who makes funky lines. That's good enough, right? You don't need to talk in depth about every artist. If you're doing a related text in English, you don't need to talk about everyone that you mention, right? You say, so I'm comparing Animal Farm to 1984, and then you mention, right, say The Crucible because it talks about communism, or you mention Lord of the Rings because it's anti-war, or something like that. But you don't talk about the entirety of Lord of the Rings, just mention, right, J.R. Tolkien didn't like war, and yada yada, just like Huso and Huso. It's the same thing for art, and the more bits and bobs that you remember, the better. They don't even have to be from the same time. They could be from the same time, but if you don't want to, you can just mention anybody. You just say enough stuff and they'll give you marks. Do art if you want to. Don't think that because you can't paint or you can't draw or you can't do something that you can't do this. You might be able to. You don't know. Take an art class before the HSC starts, and teachers don't even ask you for a final idea and a final draft before you start working until, like, I don't know, April. So you've got plenty time to think to yourself, should I experiment, right? Go take a sculpture class, go take a, I don't know, lino cutting class. You might like lino, you might like sculpture, you might like marble, I don't know. If you can get a new skill in a short amount of time and prove to your teachers that that's something that you can do, then ta-da!